Idea of this video, or I guess the motivation came from another YouTube video that I watched where the content creator was talking about basically there being this shift in culture or this shift in us as people, but it was more so tailored towards music and a little bit of culture mixed into there. But I wanted to expand on that just a little bit because me and a lot of people around my age group right now, and that's the in between. I think they call us zillennials or cuspers. The ones that are born between the years of 1995 and basically 2000. A little too young to be considered millennials necessarily, a little too old to be considered Gen Z. And I don't know if anybody else feels the way that I feel about this. This is simply my perspective. But I've been much more nostalgic these days than I have at any other point of my life. And I wanted to get on and just kind of digest the psychology of nostalgia. But to do that, first you need the definition, right? So, the definition of nostalgia is a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. So, basically, how that breaks down is a point in your life where you remember being happy regardless of what the actual situation was. Maybe because of blissful ignorance, maybe because of an event or a person or a setting, right? A lot of us attribute this to our childhoods. When we look back, we look on our childhoods very fondly if you were lucky enough to have a good childhood, right? Or a good teenage year, or maybe, you had a great high school years or even your early 20s or whatever it is, right? There's a point in time where you were younger than you are right now and everything seemed perfect. One of the things that I see, which is a common notion, is people talk about the year 2016. Now, for me, in 2016, I was 21 years old, or I was 20 going on 21 years old. And it was a great year. I'm not going to sit here and pretend. I had a lot of fun that year. My 21st birthday was really, really, I don't know. I'd say exciting, but in reality, when I look back, I didn't really do anything besides get blackout drunk, and I went to a music festival. But it was the time mixed with what was going on in the world, mixed with the state of mind I was in and the people I was around, and I have fond memories of it. Right, a lot of really, really good music came out that year. I remember riding around in the car, and I heard "No Problems" by Chance the Rapper for the first time. I heard "Broccoli" by Lil Yachty and Drum. Lil Yachty first popped into the scene that year, even though I wasn't really a fan of Lil Yachty like that. But I look back on that time very fondly. But for me, it actually goes back much further. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about the early 2000s, or early to mid 2000s. Around that time, I was probably in my late, I don't know, what do you call those years before a teenager? Preteen years. Um, and I just think back to all the things that I did and the people that I hung around. And one of the things that actually sparked this is I came in contact with somebody that I grew up with just yesterday, actually. And we were talking about another mutual friend of ours and just all the things that we used to do as kids, the video games we used to play, the music that we, grew up listening to, and all these things. And the psychology behind nostalgia is that it was always better back then. Now, granted, I was a child. We all were, you know what I'm saying? Or a lot of us were, right? There's people that are older than me that were maybe in their teenage years or even in their high school years or even in their early 20s or whatever, right? But for me and people around my age, we're all kids. And we all seem to have had very similar experiences across the general scape. There are some people who had better childhoods than me and some people that had significantly worse childhoods than I did. But overall, when we look at it now in 2025, For those of us born in that time period, we all typically agree that that was some of the best times of our lives when we look back on it. But the problem though, is that when we look at things holistically, you realize that things really weren't as great as you think that they were. Now, from an economic standpoint, right? I'm gonna go back to, let's say, 2006, right? Obviously, not the Great Depression, but the recession happened in 2008. So, though I wasn't aware of what was going on, obviously, because in 2006 I was 11 years old, I wasn't aware of what was going on economically and financially. But now that I look at it, I can understand that in 2006, the world was not going into a great place, right? There were some memorable things that happened for me personally as a child that helped shape me into the man that I am today. But the world was not necessarily in a better place. The world was not necessarily better, right? And we can attribute this to any time period, right? If you go back to the 90s had plenty of problems. The 80s had the crack cocaine pandemic. The 70s had whatever the 70s had, and so on and so forth. Just like if you go back to the year 2016, 2016 has a lot of fond memories of me because of my personal everyday life, or my personal day-to-day life, where my mind was at and the people I was hanging around and the things that I was personally doing. But was the world actually better at that time? And that's the question. And the answer is not as much better as you would think it is. In 2016, that was the same year Trump got elected for the first time, right? And that's just to use an example. I'm sure there's more if I were to actually dig into the year 2016 and look back on just exactly what was going on. But that's just to give you a little bit of perspective that just because something was in the past and you were a little bit younger, and because when you're younger, you're so inclined to have an optimistic view on life. You have a glass half full or a glass half empty, a glass half full perspective about things. It's easy to look back and say things like, oh, times were just better, things were simpler. Well, things were simpler for people like you and me because back then life didn't matter as much. As you get a little bit older, you realize that life is a little bit more serious, or life becomes a little bit more serious to you. The worry starts to set in because of the pressures of the world and the pressure that society put on you. The point of me making this video is to let you know that you shouldn't let nostalgia be the death of you, and you shouldn't let it blind you either. The past was the past, and would I go back to redo any of it? Honestly, yeah, I would, but I wouldn't go back just for the sake of reliving it again, if that makes sense. I'll turn 30 next month, and I'm coming to terms with it in a manner of speaking, not from a standpoint of, oh, I can't believe that I'm turning 30, but from a standpoint of, wow, all this time has actually passed. I still have a lot of life to give, a lot of us do, and we can't move forward if we're constantly looking back. Shout out to President Barack Obama, or former President Barack Obama, right? I think the main cause of nostalgia blindness comes from a lack of fulfillment in your life. I feel like people that fail to fulfill themselves, especially around this time where it's this pivotal age, this pivotal shift that we're going through as people, because even though 30 is still young, and I'm not going to sit here and explain that to people, some people are either just going to understand it or they won't, right? But even though 30 is still young, when you look at it and you say, damn, I was an adult for 12 years, what have I done? You start looking back and saying things like, oh, I should have did this when I was this age, and I should have did this when I was this age. And if I could just go back, and while I'm at it, things were just better back then anyways, and I'd love to relive this again. Look, nostalgia is going to be the death of you. If you had to ask anybody, I would say that a lot of people that take their own lives have something to do with nostalgia, right? You start to feel the pain of your past, whether it's a good type of pain or a bad type of pain. And nostalgia can be the most painful feeling of all, because when you really look back, I look back on my past a lot. I look back at a lot of the people that I used to kick it with. Some people that aren't here no more. Some people that I'm just not cool with. You know what I'm saying? And then you look back at, certain things that were there for so long, especially when you were a child coming up, a teenager, a young adult coming up, and now you're looking at it and it's just gone. There's no more painful feeling than that. But that pain doesn't have to kill you. That pain should inspire you to create feelings that when you look back 10 years from now, you'll say, hey, even though I had this at one point in my life, I can have this at this point. And at this point in my life, I had that, and now I'm here. What can I do to move forward? You can't let nostalgia be the death of you. And that's all I really got to say on the subject. I just had to get on here real quick and just speak my perspective about things real quick. But yeah, don't sit up, and if you're gonna sit up and look to the past, reminisce realistically. It'll help you come to terms with things and understand that the present is all that matters and the future is all that matters. Your past is gone. It's over.